I'm just going to we'll wait a couple of minutes. I think the other two rooms are just breaking, and so I think it'd be a little less disruptive if I just wait a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, did anybody have any questions about anything I might have talked about yesterday? Were there any? We didn't really have time for a Q&A in that. Any of the statistics or issues that I brought up? Any questions about any of that? All right. Well, we will move on then. All right. So I'm going to be talking about an approach to concise writing, which I like to call an aggressive approach to concise writing. But I was concerned that that might be too aggressive of a title. And so we changed it to an active approach to more concise writing, which is maybe a little bit more collegial. But as you see as we get into it, what I'm really talking about is a very aggressive approach to doing that. If we have time toward the end of the presentation, I might try and do an exercise with you. And so I'm going to pass out a single page handout, and so you can kind of pass that around during the session. And also, we're going to have a lucky draw at the end of the conference. All right. Uh-oh. You can't see me, but you can see the presentation, so that's all right. Oh, there we go. That was quick. So I did finish the new edition of my book on mobile user assistance, and so I'm going to give this book away at the end to somebody who's in this room. So you must be present to win. So I'm going to pass around a little basket, and if you want to be in the lucky draw, put your card in the basket. Also, these slides, I've made some adjustments since I submitted them. If you want to get a copy of these slides or any of the other ones, if you put in the card, well, I'll use that. But if you don't have a card, write your name on this pad of paper or your email, and I'll make sure you get the slides from this session. And we end going into a break this morning, and so if we run out of time for a lot of questions, feel free to just come on up after the session, and we can. I'll be happy to stick around to answer those. All right. Well, as I mentioned, this is about concise writing, and I think concise writing is something that all of us are always, hopefully, are thinking about. It's something that we talk about when we're first learning about technical writing. But I think as we go on in the technical writing profession, sometimes we start to, maybe sloppy isn't the word, but we start to be a little bit more liberal with our use of words. Maybe we start to think we want to put a little bit of Hemingway into our presentation, or we feel like we're Shakespeare, and so we want to add more to it. But I think concise writing is always important to what we do. However, as I got into working with mobile user assistants and dealing with small screen devices, I realized that what I thought about concise writing wasn't working well at all. It simply didn't fit with the smaller screen real estate that was the reality of many of our devices. It also doesn't fit with a mobile interaction with those devices, which is the case that mobile means mobile, and I don't think we necessarily think about it when we're writing through our documentation, but a lot of this information that we're now putting together is being consumed by people who are moving. They're going through a train station. They're walking to their next class. They're at the shopping at the store, and they need to look up information. And it's a very different dynamic. I've watched usability tests of people working with their devices and reading information, and it's so much more difficult when you're mobile. In addition to that, there have been studies that have shown how much movement there is in devices when they're small screen devices in your hand, and that affects comprehension as you're writing. And so anything we can do to limit that amount of content is important. Now, as I started to think about concise writing, I was looking through resources about ways to do that. And one of the things that I reintroduced myself to was two different but related concepts: simplified technical English and plain English. How many people have heard of one or the other of those? So I think probably at least 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the people in the room. These aren't standards. They're best practices that have been around for many years, actually a couple of decades. Simplified technical English was put together originally by the aerospace industry and then moved out into other industries as a way to provide more precise, concise, consistent language. Plain language came out of a desire for people to have clearer language, primarily in government policy and procedure information. And these best practices have continued to be followed by many people in the technical communication profession. However, personally, I hadn't used these techniques for a long time. I hadn't paid any attention to them because I always had plenty of screen real estate. Storage no longer seemed to be a problem in terms of the delivery of content. So I'd been used to writing as much as I wanted to write. But as I got into working with small screen devices and looked at these areas again, I realized that they have a lot to say about making my information more concise. And I have some of the bullet points there. I'd suggest that possibly you go and research these if you're not familiar with them, or reintroduce yourself to them. And these are some of the things that I do talk about in my university class that I teach. But there's things like using the active voice, simple verb tenses, using language consistently, avoiding lengthy compound words, using relatively short sentences. I mean, when you look at it in a bulleted list like this, I think it seems very obvious. But to me, it was realizing that I had to exercise more in that area, that I had to work out with these concepts on a regular basis. One of the things that I pay attention to for designing user assistance for mobile apps is even the length of words that I use. And so best practices like plain English have put together lists of synonyms where you can find words that have smaller character count. And in small screen real estate, that's really important. It's almost comical to think about it when you have all the space in the world when you're at a large desktop screen. But as I'm working with mobile applications, replacing the word additional with extra saves me 5 characters. And if I'm doing that on a regular basis, that really adds up in terms of the number of horizontal characters per line. And if I can minimize horizontal characters per line, that reduces the lines that will carry over into 2 lines. And if I'm reducing the number of lines that carry over into 2 lines, that helps me keep more of the information on the current screen without requiring the user to swipe down. And so that was something that I reintroduced myself through plain English. However, all of this that I've said right here I think is useful to look at, but I realized it still wasn't enough. And so I like to say that that's good, but not enough. So what I want to talk about now is that maybe we have even a bigger challenge in front of us that can't just be handled by simplified technical and plain English. And by the way, if you were in my all-day course on Thursday, again, it was nice to see you. There's not going to be a lot of new stuff here, and I mentioned that the other day, but welcome again if you are here. Now, just for an example of a situation that I see cropping up with mobile devices is one that I'll illustrate through this Help and Tips topic that is the Help and Tips app that Microsoft puts together for the Windows Phone. And so this is an app that has documentation about how to use the phone. And what you're looking at on screen right now is, on the left-hand side, is the first window full of information that you would see if you went to that one specific topic in that app. So this particular topic is about sharing photos and videos. And so you can see that information there. Now, if you swipe upward, one window full of information, what you see on the right is the following content. But it doesn't end there. This one topic, this one help topic, has 8 windowfuls of information. Now, oops, sorry. My scanners forgot to turn that off. The information that you're looking at is dealing with sharing photos, videos, and more in a text message. And this is an important concept to people that are using the phone. And there's some issues that people will want to know about to help them in using these features. But when you look at this help topic in that small screen view, it becomes overwhelming. It looks like this is just crazy complicated to use to be able to share information, share your photos. You have to swipe upward 8 times to see all of the information. Now, in terms of technical writing, it's very well done. I mean, the components that you see in this topic are ones that we would all consider to be important. There's good titles, conceptual statements, step procedures, notes, tips. There's screen captures. There's screen captures with callouts. There's even links to videos. There's a lot of very useful information there. But in reality, when users look at this amount of information, it's just too overwhelming. Now, one of the issues that I think contributes to this is that we as writers, as we're developing information for small screens, aren't necessarily authoring in an environment that keeps us clear about the type of space that we have to be able to author in. And for an example, you can find this help topic available as a desktop version on the Microsoft site, and I gave you a link to it. So this same topic that's available for the mobile phone, you can also find using responsive design built for the desktop. And they've actually made some changes to this topic, some adjustments in terms of content, so it's slightly different, but if you go to that link that I have on that page, you see what's on this screenshot right here, which is more or less the same content as what there was for the previous version. And now, when you look at it on a desktop browser at that same topic information, it doesn't look as overwhelming. It's much easier to consume. In fact, I have it in my Chrome browser right here. And so we can scroll through that information. And there's still a lot of content there. No question about that. But it's not nearly as difficult to consume. And remember, again, with the desktop, I'm likely sitting down in a static position different than the photo. Now, this got me to thinking, when the person was writing this, Microsoft has a lot of really good technical writers, and they do a lot of good information. As I mentioned, the topic is well constructed. So what is it that suddenly we have this situation where it's so crowded? And it occurred to me that the person, when they were authoring this topic, was authoring it in a desktop browser setting. So they were authoring it with full screen real estate. And I wonder if the author ever looked at their work in the expected output delivery size. Now that's something, and the reason I was thinking about this is because it's something that I discovered a while in my own work, is that if I'm not authoring in a size that's similar to the size that I'm delivering for, I'm always going to run into problems. I'm going to be writing too much. So what I like to do is if I'm using a browser like Chrome as a display device, I can use that for testing and authoring and testing my documentation by using the developer tools to emulate the size of different devices. And so if you're not familiar with that, get acquainted with it because it's a very useful utility. So right now I'm emulating the size of an iPhone 6 screen in the Chrome browser. And as you can see, you can select many different popular phone types, and Chrome is always updating that. And so now, if I'm authoring in this environment, every word that I write, every sentence that I write that pushes my information down constantly keeps me aware of the amount of information that the user is going to have to be able to deal with. So one of the takeaways I'd like you to have from this is to consider adjusting your authoring environment for the small space, or to at least test your documentation similar to this before you finish it, so that you can see what it's like for the consumer. And the reason I mention this tool is that a lot of times we don't get to see our content until after it's been posted on a corporate server. And this is just one way that you can look at that during development. But that's still not getting to the core of things, which is, well, how do we actually reduce our content? And what I found is that in any given amount of content that I put together, I'm probably going to write more than I should be writing because I like to see my own words. And in the past, when I've edited my work to reduce it, I've kind of edited around the edges. I might take out a word here. I might adjust a phrase there. I might think a little bit about some sentences, whether to possibly combine a sentence or remove a sentence. And in the end, I would end up maybe reducing my content by 10%, possibly 20%. But for the most part, I wasn't getting significant changes. And I realized that that wasn't going to fit small screen real estate, and so I challenged myself. I'm going to set a bar now of any content that I've written. I'm going to evaluate it and see if I can get it to 25 to 30% of where it was, yet still make that information easy to understand. That's kind of the second key part to it. You want to reduce the content, but you don't want to reduce it to the point where it's just minimalist without value. And so I do this regularly now, and in my university classes, it's one of the exercises I do with the students, where I give them a passage of content and have them get down to 25 to 30%. And what you find is you can't just do simple editing. You can't remove a few words. You can't even remove a few sentences. You have to completely rethink what the essence is that you want to communicate. And a lot of times, if you already have content, it may mean ripping that up and starting over to be able to get down to that really small level. So just for an example, take a look at what I have here. And I realize you're far away, so can kind of read it a little bit. I can't see my screen that well the way we're set up here. So this is content from that Microsoft Help Tips. So step 3, tap Attach with the paperclip icon, then do one of the following. Tap Voice Note, say your message aloud, then tap Done. Tap Ringtone, then tap the custom ringtone. Only short ringtones can be attached to messages. Tap Contact, find and tap the contact you want to attach, then tap Share and the icon for sharing, which is a check mark icon. So reflect on that for a moment. What things can you think of that you could do that would reduce that content? What kind of manipulations could you do that would make it smaller but still clear? And maybe we can have the microphone here so that you can hear all the questions easily. And okay, let's hear some of your thoughts.
Hi, my name's Priyanka. I work at Hewlett-Packard. First things, I think we can remove the word tap from all of those bullet points. I mean, it's redundant and it's not required because you've already said tap firstly. And you don't have to necessarily mention, voice note, ringtone, contact, all of that. It's already available. You just have to tell them what to do against which particular requirement.
Yeah, so there's a couple of good points there. The first one, I call that factoring, where you can reduce redundant content. And then there's some sections that may not necessarily be relevant to getting the information that the user needs. For example, only short ringtones can be attached to messages. Possibly that's something that can be delivered as a remedial message if somebody tries to put that information in, and would be better in the UI. Other questions? Yeah.
So I would have more of icon pictures over there, and just kind of like specify the process using arrows and icons. I don't think that we need words really.
You don't need words.
Yeah.
Arrows and more images, right? And keep the microphone there for a second. So, what do you think about where it says attach and the paper clip?
Attach and the paper clip?
Do you think it's would be appropriate to just show the paper clip? It sounds like most people were thinking just the paper clip. It's probably the case that only the people at Microsoft that actually have to know what that paper clip is technically called. Everybody else just looks at the paper clip. Now that's not always the case, and you need to think about that, and you need to make sure for accessibility situations that you've added the alternate text in the underlying code so that a screen reader can process that icon. So there's some good points there, and just to show, like in my exercising, what I had is that right there. Now I'm not saying that this is necessarily the best solution, but I think the main thing that I want to point out from the example is that it's a radical departure from the other format. It's trying to think of how I can significantly reduce the amount of content, and the things that we just talked about are reflected in that. Let's get the microphone. That'll include it in the recording as well.
I just have one comment to make with the way you've done it on the right-hand side. You say tap the paper clip, and then you say again, then tap. So again, it's redundant. I mean, that's my perspective. Yeah, but then still, you don't really need it. My perspective.
Yeah, it's possible that second tap could have been left out.
Joe, if I may, I tend to think that what you have given are not options. So I would probably do, or would probably think that I'll have to tap voice note, then done, then a ringtone, and so on. Because that sentence which says that do one of the following is missing.
Yeah. Now, one of the things about doing this is that I think doing things like this helps foster discussions in our own group as to standards that we want to pursue. And you might have issues like were just brought up about it, and we can talk about it. And more importantly, possibly we test it. We do some use case scenarios with some of our customers where 5 people try the one on the left and 5 people try the one on the right, and you see if there's any difference in terms of the comprehension, and then you make adjustments from that point. Now let's do another example, also from this help topic. So it says, to share a photo or video, that's the title, to share a photo or video. You can share a photo or video you've just captured or one that's been on your phone for a while. You can even share photos from your SkyDrive or Facebook account in the cloud. You reflect on that, and let's see if we get some new people. Looks like over in this center area. We have a comment.
Hi, I'm Soumya. We could just use bullet points instead of 2 sentences with 6 lines. You can just say you can share bullet 1 photo or video that you have just captured, bullet 2 that's been on your phone for a while, or bullet 3 photos from SkyDrive or Facebook.
Well, it's a possibility. We have to see how it works out to see what kind of space we're saving there.
Frankly, I've never looked at text before I shared a video or photo. The thing is, as a writer, I think I'll also need to trust the UI. If the UI is really intuitive, if I tap share and I know that I see the icons, SkyDrive, Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever, then I really don't need to read this text. So I don't think we require this.
No, that's a good point. I'm going to show some examples from that in a couple more slides. I'll talk about obvious issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say to share a photo or video from your phone or cloud account. That's it.
Yeah. So just looking at what I have, I changed it around and kind of made the title part of one sentence. You have share any photo or video that's on your phone or in SkyDrive or Facebook. Phrases like or one that's been on your phone for a while. How is that even relevant to what we're talking about? So again, it's just radically changing what's there, and then have some discussion about it. Now, just to show another example, here's an E-Trade app where if you go to the help, there's a frequently asked set of questions and answers. And one of those is, how do I adjust my timeout settings? Now, it's already fairly brief, but just to show you how I'm trying to train my eye to look at topics, to edit them to be more concise, the red lines are like the things that I'm trying to train myself to grab onto and think about as potentially expendable things that I won't have in there. Now, a point was brought up just previously about from the audience regarding not dealing with information that is intuitively obvious in the UI. Now, in traditional documentation, I think we've become very accustomed to providing a lot of feedback. Do this, now you see that on the screen. And that's been around for a long time as a staple of how we write, but we simply don't have the room for that anymore. And so you need to look for things that are obvious. So the key in this procedure is getting the person to the timeout session after box. The fact that you can select from 5, 15, and 30 minutes is completely obvious when you get to that point in the app. There are only those 3 choices. And so talking about it in the procedure doesn't necessarily help us. And let me pushed up a little bit on time. So
Joe? Yeah. Just one point I want to make here, specific, because you're, using the example of E-Trade. So the audience or the users of this particular app are unlikely to be familiar with, shares and stocks and all of these kind of things. And because it's like a money matter, they get very nervous. So I have often found that when we give them a lot of text in that particular scenario, just I'm talking about, people feel a little comfortable. So have you ever thought about that? That in certain industries, in certain fields, more text might make your users more comfortable?
I think you always have to consider that more text will be useful, but in my experience with small screen and mobile, we don't have the luxuries that we had in the past. And if you think that's the case, then what I would say to you is prove it, test it, and do a use case scenario with two different versions and know that that in fact has a measurable difference. If it doesn't, I don't believe it really needs a lot of explanation. However, there are a few things in that array of controls that aren't that confusing. Now, they do provide a frequently asked questions solution, and that's what you see in items E and F. So they use two screen panels where they essentially talk about every one of the features in those four controls. But most of them are very obvious. And so in my revision, I did some factoring, and I noticed that steps 1 and 2 were the same for all four of the controls. And then for each of the controls, I just included the part that I thought was confusing. So most of the things were obvious, but each part had its own little unique aspect that I thought was a bit confusing. And so those are the only things that I documented. And so then the result is I ended up with about 3/4 of a window full of information versus 2 windowfuls of information. And then I still, in one window full of information, had room for a screen capture with callouts and a tip that wasn't included in the original documentation. So not only can concise writing reduce the amount of content, but it can give you space to maybe add more fidelity to your information. Now, one of the apps that I've worked with was called TimeWorks. And when I put together the help topic for that, I really wanted to change how it was set up. And so the design choices shown on the left are ones that I tried to use, and for the most part I use in many of my projects, which is whenever possible, I want to keep information to one window full of information in response to any particular task that people are involved with. Whenever possible, I try to abbreviate sentences in some way, and you saw me using different alternative ways of doing that, sometimes using a greater than sign instead of connecting words. I highlight UI labels. I use icons instead of the labels for those icons. I usually also leave out step numbers to save a little bit of line length. There's no periods, but that was just a personal choice to just make it look a little less formal. So those are things that I'm always trying to bring into my topics as well. A couple of other examples I think are nice to look at is DirecTV has an elegant example where the two steps that it presents here don't seem like they amount to much text, but there's a lot of thought that went into these examples because I use this app, and it really helps you quickly get to a couple of core features that through the use of the screen capture and the way that they oriented the text, the typeface, and the bolding. In E-Trade, they use an overlay, and here it was the language that I really liked that was used in the center area, sort by tapping on any column header. There's a little keyhole showing the piece that they're talking about, but the big word in bold, sort, That's the value item. That's the delivered promise to the user of why they should care about this information. Do you want to sort? Here's sort. And then how do you sort? By tapping on any column header. In this Dick's Sports app, Hints for Successful Scanning, it uses images and color to highlight the key elements that you want. And so even if you don't read the text, light, distance, shaking, weight, you're being alerted as to the key items that you should pay attention to. Now in my class, I use this example, which is web-based content, which matches the content that I presented to you, and it's designed for a web page for information about how to get to and from the airport in Seattle, where I'm from. And this information is also presented in mobile. And so you can see what you'd find here if you scroll down on the web page in the desktop browser. And then this is what you see if you look at it on the mobile device. Now, they do use progressive disclosure buttons for the two main sections, but once you're into the main section, there's still quite a lot of information there, and you have to do a lot of scrolling to be able to process that information. And so, things like this, I think, are useful exercises to reflect on ways that you can reduce that content. And we only have just less than 2 minutes to be able to finish up, so I don't think we have time for a long an exercise on this. But I don't know, maybe just looking briefly at the different sections. Is there anything that jumps out at you that you might make an adjustment to? Oh, so you want me to cut it off? Oh, okay. Oh, all right. So the suggestion was we could continue during the tea break. Thank you for that example. So that's a good idea. So what I'll do is finish up and adjourn, and then we can continue on if any of you choose in the tea break. Just to review the items that I talked about, review and apply practices like simplified technical English, author in a workspace approximating your device screen real estate, aggressively edit for concise word count. Don't document what is obvious. Experiment with different ways to present content, and consider usability testing that information as well. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and then the last thing I'll do is the lucky draw while everybody is still here. So is the basket available with cards?
Yes, it's
Stack
with
it
me.
around?
The basket is here with me. What I'm going to suggest is people pass on their cards to this end of the row, and I'll collect it at this end. Yeah, so just write it on paper. I'll give you the pads. So write it on paper and just give me the paper. All right, if you don't have a business card, just write on a paper and give it to me.